What a joy it is to be here and to see these many smiling faces and people who care about the environment and care about forests and care about livable communities. It's really a thrill to be here. This is the combination of a few months, I think since about Christmas, when Francis was visiting in Kauai, where we happened to be at the time, and we started talking about Creative United Festival for this year and what themes that she could pursue. And this is one of this session came out of those discussions. My name is Michael Kuhn, and my wife Jenica Wayman at the back, who helped with Anne and Francis to design and coordinate and develop this theme of this symposium we're going to have today, which has the theme of forests and communities for the future, the sustainability connection. And we hope this is kind of an action workshop. There's going to be speakers who are going to share their depth of knowledge about forests and the situation with forest management in this province at this time, as well as communities and communities that seek to thrive and live within forested areas. There's great challenges. We're going to discuss some of those challenges, and we hope through an active dialogue with you here that we'll identify some actions that actually can move us into a new paradigm. So the question we seek to answer in this symposium is, how can we transition to truly sustainable forestry and livable, viable human communities in and around forests? Now, I am not the chair today, and it's my joy, my great joy, to introduce Anne Mortifee, who will chair today's session and be one of the presenters. I've had the great joy of knowing Anne for maybe 15 or 20 years now. And as time has passed, we've got to know her more and more in different lights. I first got to know her as a sort of a seminar leader, enjoying singing and developing your voice and all that. And many of you, how many of you have heard Anne as a performer? So most of you. So you know Anne well from that side of the equation. So you know that she's a passionate, great performer. And what I've come to learn about Anne over the last 10 years or so is that she's just as passionate and has great vision and great compassion for the world, for the natural world, and for the necessity of the interconnectedness. She sees and feels the interconnectedness between the natural world and our human world. To her, they're the same thing. What we do to one, we do to the other. So we know Anne as an Order of Canada recipient, a great composer and singer, a writer of scores, sound scores for ballets and musicals. But she is all that, and a writer of books. She's more than that. She's a passionate defender of the environment. She loves forests. She can hear them sing. And because of that love of the forests and the natural world, she is also the founder of the Trust for Sustainable Forestry and one of the creators of Everwoods and the Elkington Living Forest Community Models, which we'll discuss more as we get into today's discussion. So I ask you to give a warm round of applause for Anne, welcoming her up here.
Thank you. You will discover that I'm much better with a script or music. I run the chair I'm the chair of the Trust for Sustainable Forestry, but those who are on the board know that I always have to say, when do we do the seconding, or when do we have a motion? So today may not be altogether pragmatic and sensible and work one step to the next, but I realized years ago that I was profoundly in love with nature. I grew up on a sugarcane farm in Zululand. And so my earliest recollections are of being out on the veld with the animals, and I moved to Vancouver when I was around 10 and felt something that I didn't know what it was until I moved to Cortez Island and started living at the end of a four-wheel dirt road overlooking Desolation Sound, and I loved every minute of it because I was out in the wilderness and I saw that I had been lonely since I left Africa, and what I was lonely for was to be in harmony with nature. And so as I began to watch the clear cuts grow up all around where I lived, the reason I created the Trust for Sustainable Forestry was because I literally could not bear to see the land being devastated the way it was. And so I took a giant risk, and I remember the land next door was coming up, and the only ones bidding on it were clear-cut loggers. And so I was telling Hans this morning, I went out on the beach and I said, okay, to whom it may concern, I cannot bear that this land be cut down, so if you want me to try and find a way to buy this land, place a white eagle tail feather on the beach today. And of course, it wasn't the time that they molted, so I was pretty safe. And I said, and if I find that feather, I will lay down my life for this land. And lo and behold, I took 50 steps, and there it was, lying on a beautiful piece of seaweed, and I went, oh, God. So the journey goes on, and the great love I have is for people like Frances, who has taken these incredible photographs, Frances Littman, who put this whole vision together and is an unbelievable worker. She's extraordinary. So while her beautiful photographs are showing, I thought I'd like to honor the Esquimalt nation and the Songhees. And I'd like to just sing a little something to open the day and recite a prayer, or not a prayer, a poem I wrote years ago. And it goes like this. The woods are wet and still, and pillared firm with fir and pine, locked tight against the evil eye or the saintly stare. They stand aloof, untouched, unchanged, as mists of clouds descend and rise. And I at times of silence thus, do sense a presence nigh. Within each moss, each leaf, each root, a key lies hid. I seek that key, yet God knows where the door will lead me to. The woods are wet and still and wise and quiet as the evening falls. And I find peace within this tide as mists of clouds descend and rise. This is a prayer for the forest. This is a prayer for the land. This is a prayer for the deep soil where the wise old ancient cedar stands. This is a prayer for the cougar. This is a prayer for the fawn. This is a prayer for the sparkling stream where the wild, wild salmon spawn. This is a prayer. This is a prayer This is a prayer for the deep soil where the wise cedar stands. So I wanted to tell you about, as an intro, how I fell in love with trees. Other than as a little girl, there was the jacaranda tree outside where I had a little box that I hid in a crook, and I felt that that tree looked after it for me. It was my treasure box. And then later on, when I was 18, I was gifted to work with Chief Dan George when I wrote the music for what later became a ballet, but was originally a play called The Ecstasy of Leadership. And I remember I used to walk up into the mountains outside of Vancouver with Chief Dan, and he would tell me stories. And we would sit out on an old log, and often we'd sit there for 2 hours, and he wouldn't say a word. And I began to sink into the beauty of what was around me. Coming from Africa to a rainforest was a leap. And he helped me to make that leap. And one of the things he told me stayed with me. He said, we teach our children how to talk to the standing people. Because if they get lost in the woods and no one is there to help them, they have to know how to talk to the trees. Because the trees saw them come in, so they'll show them the way out. And I thought that was very sweet. But years later, I was working in a theater in Milwaukee, and a friend and I were offered a little cabin outside of the city, and where we could spend the weekend. So we went out there, and it was beautiful, and he had told us that there was a lovely walk we could take, and to take a lunch, and we could go up to a bluff and so forth. And so we packed a lunch, and it was in the middle of, it was sort of late fall. And we walked for about 3 hours through this fabulous thing, and we could see where the path was. It was light, but it was there. And we sat down all wrapped up in a bundle, and we're having our lunch, and it began to snow. And the snow got thicker and thicker, and of course we were just enjoying it, and then suddenly went, oh, where's the path? Everything had been covered over. And so we walked around this big clearing, and I said, we'll recognize something. We didn't. So he immediately said, we've got to build a lean-to, because any direction, we have no idea. The sun was gone, so we had no idea which direction to go. And he said, start collecting branches, and we'll make it till the morning, and then we'll figure out, maybe it'll rain or stop snowing or whatever. And I said, oh, I remember Chief Dan told me this story about how you could ask the trees, and they would show you the way out. And he looked at me and said, you've got to be kidding. And I said, no, but why don't we try that? He said, Anne, just get the branches. I said, no, I'm going to just try, because they saw us, of course. Never entered my mind they weren't awake. Never entered my mind they weren't alive. Never entered my mind I couldn't talk to them. So there I am I was probably 26 at the time, 23, 26, something like that. So I went into the middle of the clearing and said, excuse me, standing people, Chief Dan George has told me that I can talk to you, and I've never done this before, and Bill is saying, Anne, please, just get the branches. And I said, Bill, relax. So anyway, I started talking to the trees, and I got completely carried away. And then I looked over, and there was a tree pointing in a direction to go. So I said to Bill, look, that's the way, the path is over here. And he said, Anne, how do you know that? And I said, well, look, that tree, it's pointing. And he said, Anne, they're all pointing in different directions. So I said, I'm going to go over and check. So I go over. Of course, it's totally covered over with snow. So I said, Bill, this is the way to go. I know it. Anyway, I say, I'm going. And he said, Anne, we're not going. We are going. No, we're not going. And I said, I tell you what, Bill, I'll break little twigs. I heard in guides you could do that. So I'll break the little twigs, and I'll come back and get you when I find the way. He said, we're not separating. Okay, well, then we're going this way. So off I go with Bill behind me the whole way going, I can't believe it. And of course, it took us 3 hours to get there, so now we're talking 3 hours back. And every so often, and I'm not kidding, I don't know how, I was so wonderfully naive that I'd see somebody one of the trees pointing another way, and I'd turn to it and I'd say, thank you, I so appreciate your help. And off we'd go in that direction. Bill behind me. Anyway, 3 hours go by, and it starts to get dark. And then it's so dark we're climbing over logs and like falling and everything. And it's like somebody put a pin into my balloon, and I said, oh my God, I'm so sorry. What was I thinking? I'm so sorry. I'm so embarrassed. And I started to cry. And I said, I've probably killed us, and now it's too late to make the lean-to, and I'm so sorry, and forgive me. Oh, Bill, I'm such an idiot. Why did I think that blah, blah, blah? And so I've got my head against his chest, and he's looking that way, and I'm saying, I'm so sorry, and he's saying, it's okay. Let's just see if we can make it work now. And then it gets darker and darker, and then he says, oh, wait, I think I see a light. So I turn around, and oh my God, it is a light. So we scramble through the dark and get to the light. Well, we were right at the back porch of the place we were staying in. And before we went in, I turned back to the forest and I said, I am forever your faithful servant. Thank you. And so my life has been filled with things like that with the trees. I now have a tree house that I sleep in all through the summer. And I was brought into this not because I have any skill and not because I know what I'm doing, but I trust I'll know people who know what I'm doing. So the Trust for Sustainable Forestry was created as a vision to be able to find a different way of working with the forests. And I'm just so thrilled with the people who have agreed to come and be with us today. And one of the people I've just met, but I have known about you forever, Ray, and I have wanted to bend down and kiss your little pink toes on occasion. And Ray Travers, I'd like you to tell people how you came to this and anything else that is in your desire. Because Ray is very knowledgeable about different ways of working with the forests. He was with the Eco-Forestry Institute for a long time, still is, I believe. And so Ray, thank you.